So then it's my pleasure also to welcome you all here today and to introduce our first guest, Ursula Biemann. She will introduce herself, her work too, but I would like to say a few words about her as an artist, video essayist, and researcher. She has traveled extensively to regions ranging from the Amazonian rainforest to the Arctic Sea, exploring the ecological crises that are strongly connected to colonial history. Aligning her video art with field research, she has explored a diversity of knowledge systems on nature, interspecies life, and ecological cohabitation. In her more recent work, she has been very much interested, as she says herself, in bridging scientific and indigenous perspective, embodied in her films frequently in the figure of the indigenous scientist that has emerged from a shared history of colonial conquest and modern natural science. This is particularly the case in her video Forest Mind, on which she will focus in this talk tonight. That belongs to a body of work that evolved from collaborative research in the Amazonian forests of Colombia. In her artistic work, the epistemology of the forest combines documentary and fictional modes of narration with poetry, performance, imagination, and multi-species communication, inviting also non-human voices and sounds, heard and unheard, that constitute a semiotics of nature as an alternative to Western anthropocentric science. Among her numerous publications is the audiovisual online monograph, Becoming Earth. If you don't know it yet, you can simply go to her website and read this monograph. It was published in 2021 with the Museum of Art at the National University of Colombia in Bogota, and includes also her ecological video works from 2011 until 2021. She's had so many solo exhibitions at renowned European art institutions and contributed to so many major exhibitions worldwide that I won't name all the locations here. What I would like to explicitly point out, though, is that since 2018, she has been working on a major commission by the Museum of Art at the National University of Colombia for the co-creation of an indigenous university and an online platform with the name Devenir Universidad. This university, still to become, is established in collaboration with the Inga people of Colombia with the aim to facilitate further research on forest epistemologies, this is the word that she uses, understanding the knowledge as being acquired by learning from nature and the Amazonian territory forming a living cognitive territory that is the actual university itself. And we very much thank you that you are here, and please come, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for this amazing introduction. I think I'm going to ask you for this text afterwards. So I'm going to pick up right where you left off, where you explained how my practice lies at the intersection of art, ecology, and indigenous cosmologies. I will mainly speak about Forest Mind and the collaborative project Devenir Universidad, located in the Colombian Amazon. But I did go a few years ago, 10 years ago, I made a video on the Ecuadorian side of Amazonia on related issues around the impact of large-scale oil and mining projects on indigenous lands and the rights of nature which emerge from these territorial conflicts. In these new video projects, though, I'm focusing less on the geopolitical aspect of these disastrous developments in the Amazon. Instead, I'm exploring questions around the intelligence in nature, indigenous science and research, and how these knowledges can be transmitted. There is a lot of new science in microbiology and plant neurology that helps us better understand this emerging field of intelligence in nature. For my part, I was particularly interested in learning more from the indigenous communities about the kind of science they practice and how they imagine their relationship with the forest. The relationship between humans and the natural world has a defining history in the Amazon. The first European botanists who made contact with the exceptional biodiversity of the tropical forests of Latin America and Colombia in particular, brought back thousands of specimens and data from their overseas expeditions. They became a major driver for the advancement of natural science in Western universities. They really boomed after these returns of the botanists, just to remind us that the beginning of modern natural science is intimately linked with the project of conquest and colonization. This moment coincided with the rise of modern Western thinking, and driven by this Darwin's theory of evolution, the removal of clerical domination over the scientific establishment. And with this, the relationship with nature was taken out of the public sphere and delegated to natural sciences, where it was denied any political agency. Within the context of colonization, this shift had far-reaching consequences. Since indigenous people were considered part of the natural realm, they were placed in this scientific area short of political agency. Their knowledge systems and cosmologies were quickly colonized, converted, and eventually delegated to the new academic discipline of anthropology. What I'm saying here is that indigenous people are put in a particularly vulnerable place, not only by colonization, but also by the premises of modern Western science and teaching. That's why my projects in Colombia concentrate on the politics of knowledge.
Que la gente de nuestra comunidad utiliza este para hacer remedio para la picadura de los zancudos, de la fiebre muy alta. Esta es la quina. La gente del pueblo ya conoce que aquí hay mucha quina y se viene también a buscar. Acá todo esto es pelado, vean. Todo esto que usted ve es pelado. Esto es quina. Aquí no puede vivir como doctor o abogado, aquí puede vivir con conocimiento empírico, ¿cierto? Pero ese conocimiento empírico no es reconocido dentro de las escalas del sistema de las ciencias. Entonces, ahí ya hay un desequilibrio a nivel de reconocimiento y de justicia, con la norma, con la realidad. Entonces, ahí es donde empezamos a hablar sobre sujeto-objeto. Los empíricos son los objetos, ¿cierto? No son sujetos, no son reconocidos como sujetos, son los objetos. Entonces, ahí tampoco hay justicia. Y los abuelos siempre han dicho, el reconocimiento de nosotros como realmente expertos, porque son los expertos. Uno dice, ¿quién se inventó químicamente dos plantas que el chagropanga y el yagé estuvieran juntos, ¿cierto? Para que la combinación de estas dos pudiera usted volar a otro mundo o trasladarse a otro mundo. ¿Quién investigó más al bosque que un biólogo? Un anciano. Esa es la dinámica de la justicia, de entender este conocimiento en un marco, en un plano, digamos, de las ciencias. Yo digo de las ciencias.
This was Vaira Hakanamihoe, who is a leading social leader of the Inga people, who is speaking about the epistemic justice here. So my involvement in Colombia started a few years ago with an invitation from Museum Director Maria Belén Saez in Bogotá to go on a field trip to the Andean Amazon, an extremely biodiverse region. In the south of Colombia had been closed off for several decades and had just opened up with the signing of the peace agreement. For a whole month, the leader of the indigenous Inga people took me through the region on his bulletproof car. At the end of the trip, he asked me if I could help him set up a university in his territories. That's how I became involved in co-creating an indigenous university with the Inga people. I agreed to his request because the project supports the much-needed paradigm shift from an extractive to a more imaginative and generative interaction with Earth and its natural life worlds. I also saw it as a great chance to engage with indigenous knowledge systems. Biodiversity and epistemic diversity have co-evolved over millennia, as you mentioned already. They are completely entangled, so much so that if one of them dies, the other one disappears too. The ancestral knowledge of the forest is critical for the survival of the forest. So the idea of this university is to strengthen ancestral knowledge and to cooperate with Western science where they are compatible. It's quite a unique concept for a university, or pluriversity, as we call it. It was particularly touched by the idea that considering all the violence, political and economic pressure the Inga are facing on a daily basis, the community decided that it is a university that will make the difference.
La gran mayoría de nosotros como ciudadanos Inga, lo que hacemos, lo que reproducimos, es lo que no es nuestro. Lo que aprendimos desde el momento del preescolar ahora hasta los doctorados. Y si estamos haciendo eso, estamos contribuyendo a profundizar una crisis que está viviendo el mundo desde lo que ha generado desde el conocimiento, en una ruta que se ha impuesto como algo que es lo más verdadero, lo científicamente probado. Y me parece que eso lo que ha hecho es ocultar las otras rutas de acceder al conocimiento, que en este caso son las rutas de los indígenas, de los pueblos indígenas. Y es una cosa muy fuerte, desde luego. Pero estamos allí. Y nos parece que tarde o temprano, de nuevo, esos traslapes tienen que quebrarse, tienen que transformarse. Porque es un tema que ha surgido bajo principios de violencia. Y en ese sentido es que nos parece que hoy por hoy es importante que el conocimiento impuesto y los conocimientos propios tengan un espacio de diálogo. Y ese diálogo no lo veo en otros contextos, sino es en una figura que se dice es la universidad, aunque con el tiempo eso tenga que ir cambiando también de nombre. Pero por ahora, para hacer un poco más comprensible el mensaje en términos de lo que hay, voy a decir que es una universidad. Más adelante podrán decir que es una pluriversidad, una yachayhuasi, por ejemplo, lo que sea. Pero es lo que en este momento a lo que acudimos. Y ese tiene que ser un punto de encuentro de los saberes para reflexionar en cómo se apoyan, en qué van a construir, en qué van a retornar, en qué se van a regresar y dónde tienen que colocarse de nuevo en impulsos más propios, menos violentos, más sagrados, de tal manera que se pueda en principio, sobre todo, creo yo, respetar la dignidad, esa dignidad de la diferencia que cada uno es.
Art and video making are important in this project as a way of creating a visual and intellectual memory of this unique process of becoming university, but also for generating videos on the Inga knowledge and history, and for communicating the project within the community and with the world at large. I call this part of the project Devenir Universidad, Becoming University. The project acts as an initiator and aesthetic companion to the future university by creating exhibitions, publications, and an online platform. A major task in the protection of an endangered culture consists in establishing a living audiovisual archive of the pluri-epistemic voices of the elders, healers, social leaders, traditional medics, and other forest beings. The archive holds many voices who remember the territorial history, how the missionaries came to re-educate them, how their ancestral land was rapidly sold off to large cattle farmers or licensed to oil and mining companies. Let me get you another picture here. But there is also the memory of the knowledge of plants and the wisdom of life. And this knowledge, whatever remains of it, needs to be protected because it is tied to the biodiversity of the forest. Devenir Universidad is a collective fabric where indigenous and Western knowledge traditions intertwine, nurture each other, and mutually transform, with equal recognition granted to academic and indigenous researchers. To open a contemporary dialogue, we align with innovative approaches in scientific fields such as ethnobotany, the anthropology of science, earth law and indigenous rights, environmental sciences and philosophies engages with the life of forests and plants, all of which put forward ideas that are compatible with Amazonian cosmologies. Western universities would do well allowing for a greater epistemic plurality at this time of dwindling biodiversity. In Devenir Universidad, what is becoming university is not so much the Inga people, but the territory itself, the living, sentient, cognitive territory, because all knowledge comes from there. As the Inga say, knowledge can only be produced in the encounter with the land and all the beings who inhabit it. It occurs while walking through the land. When their territories get destroyed in the Amazon, they don't just lose land, they also lose their ability to think and to know. That's why the university is not going to be a centralized campus, but a network of sites and paths spreading across the vast territory where knowledge can be practiced in the form of forest learning, river learning, cloud learning, chakra learning. The notion of territory is central to the Inga thought. That's the first thing we need to understand. Territory is not a delineated piece of land. It is a cognitive sentient unit that emerges from the ecological relationship between all beings who inhabit the space. This is perhaps the most fundamental difference between Western and indigenous thinking. In Western modern science, to know something well is when you can observe it from a distance, when you can measure, register, analyze, describe, and categorize it. From this perspective, territories are represented as a biophysical reality of sorts, a collection of plants, animals, mountains, forests, and rivers. Indigenous science conceives a totally different territorial paradigm. To know something well is to recognize its intentionality and thus turning it into a subject where we can have a conversation between persons. We encounter the other as mind. My new video, Forest Mind, emerges from this long-term collaboration with the Inga on the Indigenous University. Forest Mind is about the intelligence in nature viewed from a scientific and a shamanic perspective. From Western science, we have learned a lot in recent years about the ability of plants to sense, communicate, and take decisions. There is a growing respect for plants, but for indigenous people in the Amazon, this intelligence goes much further. A vital force and permeates all that exists, both visible and invisible entities, endowing them with awareness and meaning. The human mind-spirit is in constant communication with these forces, and so are the plant spirits and the animal spirits. There is an innate intelligence in nature down to the molecular level. Shamans in the Amazon practice the science of ayahuasca, a psychoactive plant that allows them to engage with this life energy. They consider ayahuasca an intelligent person and a master plant, a plant teacher. She communicates through chemistry, and part of that chemistry are neural transmitters. Through a peculiar co-evolution, they happen to fit into the receptors in the human brain, creating a unique mode of telepathic communication between the plant and the person who ingests it. It is the result of millennia of co-evolution hitting precisely the part of the human brain that activates the sensibilities of perceiving, sensing, and imaging. In Colombia, the shamans are called taitas. To master this science requires a long apprenticeship that involves the rigorous psychoanalytic process that ayahuasca sets in motion. Knowledge that is produced in this manner is bound to be subjective and thus cannot be replicated and transmitted on a large impersonal scale. The indigenous communities in the Amazon are deeply concerned because every time one of their old taitas is dying, a whole library goes up in flames. Every shaman has a highly specific knowledge that other shamans don't have, but they do share common premises. They have always insisted on the interconnectivity of all life. With the discovery of DNA in the 50s, this has also been confirmed by Western science. We are all made of the same DNA: trees, plants, insects, mammals, humans. We are all interconnected in this deep structural way. My intention with Forest Mind is to bring Western and indigenous science into dialogue in a contemporary way. How do each of them apprehend life? DNA is the code of life nested in every living cell. These DNA molecules emit light waves, so-called biophotons. It's in the ultra-weak light range, but with new instruments they are measurable. Hence, DNA are quantum. They consist of a material, energetic, and an energetic part which are entangled. It is the energetic part that holds the information, not the material one. Amazonian medics have developed a technique that allows them to see and interact with this luminous energetic part of DNA, which they sometimes call spirits. Taitas see with their mind rather than with their eyes. What they call spirit is closer to microbiology than religion. It might directly refer to the light source in DNA that interconnects all life. For the longest time, indigenous science has been interpreted through the filter of the early missionaries who applied their own Christian concepts to what they observed. As Western science advances, we are also assessing new levels of reading the traditional medicinal practice. As a counterpart, I was wondering what Western science is doing in Colombia with regards to the tropical forest. Biotech companies have started with DNA sequencing the entire rainforest, bringing it down to the smallest fragments to be used as a resource for the industries. Bogota has become the global hotspot for bioprospecting and biopiracy, but it didn't look like these corporations were eager to collaborate with me. So for this second part of Forest Mind, I started a collaboration with ETH, the Institute for Science and Technology here in Zurich. They had made a recent technological breakthrough in new ways of using DNA knowledge. So far, information is stored in the binary digital code 0-1. The new technology converts the digital code into DNA code of ACGT, the 4 nucleobases. The DNA molecules are then stored in water in small test tubes. In this form, they are perishable within 6 months. So the ET8 technology consists in encapsulating them in microscopic glass beads so they become imperishable. In this state, they can be stored for eternity. And because it's written in humanity's own code, we will always remember it. For Forest Mind, we made an experiment at the ETH lab. We took a sound file, an image file, and a tiny piece of real seed of a tree from the rainforest, and converted everything in one single DNA code. The problem was that the outcome, these microscopic beads, don't make for an impressive presentation in the art space. So I asked if this process of DNA sequencing actually generates images that I could use in the video. The images you see in the video is a kind of 160 cross sections of the double helix, similar to a CT scan of each of the spinal vertebrae. So Forest Mind refers to the power of thought and imagination in creating realities. I have considered this video ontology an important aspect in my work for decades. In a way, Forest Mind is a combination of science and metaphysical research. With these works, I'm pleading for greater epistemic diversity in science. I have been thinking what the role of art can be in the shift towards a more ecological paradigm, apart from generally highlighting the role of art in mediating environmental knowledge. Obviously, artistic research should not just add another perspective to science. Rather, it should help to challenge the separation of these different forms of thinking by surprising and interrupting rational thinking. Thank you.